Hi, I'm Andrew, Head of Communications for Steemit, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Dave Roberts, who's not only a professor of computer science at NC State, where he runs their CIIGAR lab, which stands for Computational Intelligence and Interactive Games Research Lab, but he's also the co-founder of a Silicon Valley startup. Dr. Roberts got his undergrad degree in math and computer science and went on to study what he called interactive virtual experiences at Georgia Tech, but which he admits is just an academic way of saying computer games. His current research interests are generally in the area of machine learning and artificial intelligence and their applications to the design of interactive technological experiences such as computer games, interactive dramas, or training scenarios. He says that the designs of his algorithms are informed by concepts from psychology that can enable efficient and intuitive authorial and gameplay experiences. Dr. Roberts views games as cultural artifacts and important platforms for artificial intelligence research and seeks to use them as a window into human behavior by incorporating concepts from social psychology and observing how they manifest themselves in gameplay. Given his area of expertise, as well as his experience going from a tech outsider to a startup co-founder, I believe that the insights Dr. Roberts can provide to anyone trying to build a business in the blockchain space is invaluable. So enjoy my interview with Dr. Dave Roberts.
Good to be here with you. My background's actually in math and computer science, and I grew up in a super mathematical family. Both of my parents were college professors in math and very, very successful in their own right. And so I grew up seeing the world through the language of mathematics. I remember taking trips with my family to like Yosemite National Park, and my dad talking about how they used mathematics to design the one-way road system there to reduce pollution. So just an interesting and unique perspective on the world growing up. Being a professor is kind of in my genes, in my DNA. And I went on a pretty straight path from an undergraduate degree where I studied math and computer science to a graduate degree at Georgia Tech, where I worked on what I called, at the time anyway, interactive virtual experiences, which is really just a fancy academic way of saying computer games, because when you're trying to get money from the federal government, if you refer to them as computer games, they tend to reject your grant proposals. But within that context
Is that still the case? I feel like
it's still, yeah, I mean, it's still largely the case, unless you have a specific purpose for the games in mind beyond entertainment. And I have a whole rant about this big and growing field of games with a purpose, but I'll spare you that rant. But the short answer is, yeah, you still have to be pretty careful about it. But military, anything for the military in terms of wargaming, things like that, you can refer to them as games pretty safely. But studying games as cultural artifacts and interesting platforms for artificial intelligence research, and the way that I used them was to as a window into human behavior, looking at concepts from social psychology and how they manifest themselves in play in virtual environments is an area where you have to be a little more careful about calling them computer games. So that's what I was working on as a grad student, and then after I graduated with my PhD, my first job was as a professor of computer science. And at that point, I took a leap and brought in another huge passion area for me, which is animal behavior more generally. So I was studying human animals, their behavior in virtual environments when I was a grad student. And then when I started on my career path as a professor, I branched out to look at non-human animals as well, and how we can design technology, both hardware and software, that bridges the gap between the way that animals naturally communicate and share and comprehend information, and the way that we can discern that communication and communicate back to animals using technology.
You also had some experience in Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah. So, I'm a firm believer that there is just a vast amount of information that animals have, that they, in many cases, want to share with us, but don't have the shared vocabulary to do so, or the technology tools to do so. And so a couple of years ago, I took leave from my job as a professor and co-founded a Silicon Valley startup company. that was aiming to bring some of the technologies that I had discovered in my career as a professor to consumers. And it's a company that's doing well, still operating in stealth for hopefully not too much longer, as development is progressing nicely, and testing is going well with the product. It will be coming out of stealth in the not too distant future, but for now it's something that I have to keep a little bit quiet.
Going from academia to entrepreneurship, first of all, I think that that's interesting in and of itself, but I also think there's some relevancy to people in the blockchain space because it's an especially, even though they're not technically academics, it's kind of a very academic discipline where you have
For sure.
developers who are just really engineers who are passionate about these kind of decentralized technologies that are kind of cutting edge. So
For
are
sure.
there any lessons? So I mean, it sounds like you agree. So assuming you agree, is there anything you can share from your experience of going from academia to entrepreneurship, and especially like how did you navigate that transition? That seems really hard. The way I see it is that starting up a company is really all about connections and all about your
Yeah.
network. And as an academic in North Carolina, that seems tough.
No question about it. So one of the things that I found really surprising, I went into this endeavor with a completely open mind. It's something that I had dreamed about for a long time, especially when I felt like the technology that I was working on was something that I really wanted the world to have and not just live in some academic research lab somewhere. But I was always terrified of doing it because I felt like the worlds were really, really different. I felt like academic life and startup life were very, very different things. In some ways, they are. I mean, one of the things that I found in this process when I decided to take the plunge was that there are some profound differences between them, but there's also some profound similarities. I think a lot of people draw a distinction between academics and entrepreneurs, but if you look at the really successful academics, they're actually entrepreneurs. They're just entrepreneurs in a different community, right? The same things that make an entrepreneur in a startup successful are the things that make academics successful as well. The value of a network is incredibly important.
It almost sounds like you're saying it might be easier for an academic engineer to transition into entrepreneurship versus maybe an engineer who isn't in the academic circles. Is that accurate, or is it just a different approach? Like, what would you say to somebody who's watching this and going, well, that's great for you. You're an engineer and an academic, but I'm just a really great engineer. What
Yeah.
should I do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are technologists that are just amazing engineers, right? They're people that know technology inside and out. They know how to transition requirements into a realized product. They know how to evaluate risks in technical products really well. And to do that, that's an incredibly valuable skill set, and it's incredibly hard to do well. It's not necessarily an entrepreneurial skill set, though. So I think there's probably better ways to learn the skills you need to be an entrepreneur than taking the academic route. But the similarities are enough if you go into it with an open mind and you have a good mentor and you have a good entry point into the networks that are valuable in the business world, then the skills that you acquire as an academic can be retrained very, very efficiently to be applicable in the startup world.
So it sounds like you've already given basically two two strategies. One, get a mentor. Two,
Yeah,
assess the network you want access to. Is
yeah.
there any, what would you do next? And, or can you elaborate on those two?
Yeah, absolutely. So the value of mentorship is, yeah, I can't put a value on it. It's so important, even within your core discipline. I mean, even as a tenured professor at a major research university, I have mentors. Some of them are formal mentors, right, through a formal mentoring program. Some of them are just in, what I would call mentors of convenience, right? People that I just have a good relationship with, who I respect, who have more knowledge than me, or later in their career
How
have
did you
experienced.
how did you specifically meet your mentors? Because I feel like I hear that a lot. Like I
Yeah.
believe in mentorship too, but I actually don't really have any mentors because the prospect of actually finding them seems hard and kind of daunting to me.
Yeah, so it's tough, especially for somebody like me. I like to think of myself as a high functioning introvert. So I'm definitely an introvert at heart, but the process of getting out and meeting people is something that extroverts tend to excel at. And so throughout my career, I've had to learn how to cope in situations like that. All that to say, I think the underlying subtext to that is you just have to get out and meet people. I am a firm believer that you never know where your next good idea is going to come from. And I try to meet as many people as I can, get as diverse perspectives as I can, and to ask as many questions as I possibly can, and look at every interaction I have with somebody as an opportunity to learn something about something that I don't know, right? And if you look at what has I've built my career on, both as an academic and an entrepreneur, it's in bringing together two disciplines that have historically never talked to each other, right? I mean, computer science and animal behavior, I spent just the first few years of my career learning how to translate between those fields, right? Learning the vocabulary that's common in veterinary behavior, and how to map that onto concepts in computer science, and vice versa. So my approach has been really useful for the things that I have set out to accomplish in my career, and I can't stress enough the value of traveling to places, to conferences, to meetup groups, to hear speeches and lectures from big thinkers, and to, if you're like me and a bit of an introvert, to step outside your comfort zone and to go talk to people and use it as an opportunity, approach every interaction as an opportunity to learn something new.
Yeah, and I think this underlying subtext is look into things that excite you.
Yeah,
Like, don't just wander outside and start talking to people who are interested in yoga. I think that's one of the things that introverts, because I'm pretty introverted too. A lot of
yeah,
people don't believe that, but I am.
yeah,
It's when I found blockchain, and I was interested in social media
yep,
technologies that were going to make our social experiences online better. And
yep,
so going to things like meetups became opportunities to explore the technology that was powering the meetups.com.
yep,
And so that was critical for me. And I found that I actually wasn't that introverted when I started talking about blockchain, because
yep,
there's so much information about any area of interest that you can get lost. First of all, you can't process it all yourself.
nope,
And so that's when it's great to meet other people who are interested in it as well. And what I think introverts find is that it's not that all social interactions are draining. It's that the social interactions they don't like more social interactions. But if you
right,
can find the social interactions that you do like,
yep,
it's just as energizing for an introvert as an extrovert.
yep.
So I think there's a lot of good tips. We talked about finding a good mentor. I mean, how did you find your specific mentors? Maybe that can help illustrate how to go about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So
And then maybe talk about how you found your co-founder, or how you got,
yeah.
started.
Well, my co-founder actually found me.
How did
I've
he
been
find you?
I've been very, very lucky in my work as a professor. That
Well, I want to push back on this real quick,
Yeah.
which is, I would say that, because I think part of the key is maximizing the odds that the right person will find you. That's the
Yeah.
key. So now
Yeah.
you go.
Okay, fair, you're absolutely right. So interesting you say that because when I started to say that I've been very lucky, I've been incredibly lucky with how mediagenic my work has been. And the university has put a good effort into building on that and to building some momentum around it. My collaborators and I participated in an event back in 2014, which ultimately culminated in a visit to the White House to show off some of the technology that we had worked on. And the university did some news press releases about it, some of the media results that came from that. At one point, there was a video that the National Science Foundation, who had funded that work, had on its YouTube channel that was, at one point, it was in the top 10 most viewed videos on the NSF YouTube channel. And so through opportunities like that, the work that I have done has touched more than just my scientific discipline. And somebody was able to connect the dots based on that. So my co-founder talked to somebody that he was working with at the time, who happened to be aware of my work, and introduced the two of us. And then we went through the kind of the standard co-founder dating, and then made the decision to get together and co-found the company officially. So when I say, put yourself out there and meet people, that's exactly the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, right? Don't market yourself for the sake of marketing yourself, but when you've got something interesting that you think people will like, put it out there, and put it out there in the best manner that you can to reach the kind of people that you want to reach. For me at the time, having funding from the federal government, I viewed it as my responsibility to try to share this work with a broader audience. And in particular, the nature of the work that I do with technology and animals, I view as something that can be really useful for getting young people, especially young women, excited about STEM disciplines, right? When they learn that computing is not just sitting in front of a keyboard and staring at a monitor all day long, but when it's computing can mean developing wearable devices that you can put on dogs to help interpret their behavior, right? It can really excite young minds, and so I was trying to pay it forward, or I guess pay it back, at the time, by sharing the work that we were doing with that kind of audience. But it ended up paying some great dividends on top of that.
The title of this series, right? It's Decentralized Entrepreneurship and Marketing.
Yeah.
And the reason I chose that title, there's kind of a theory behind it that's been motivating me for years now, which probably is not nowhere near apparent. But there's a reason I didn't include engineers in there. First of all, going forward, the engineer is of ultimate importance. So it's almost like they have to be implied in any organization. So
Yep.
It's like implicit. But the way that things are changing is also that everybody is also going to have to become an entrepreneur. And everybody is also going to have to become a marketer. And I don't mean that sounds scary to a lot of people, but when I say you have to become a marketer, what I mean is you have to be able to intelligently articulate what you're interested in right now. Because what this technology that we've developed enables us to do is to amplify our message by orders of magnitude. So
Yep.
You can keep to yourself what you're doing, but you are going to be destroyed by anybody else who is just putting what they're doing out there inarticulately if they have to. It doesn't matter if you're, you mentioned being, having your project be mediagenic. I kind of think that as long as you're pursuing something that's on the edge of what you're interested in, it's always going to be of intense interest to some group of people, whether
Yep.
they have access to media channels or not, but it's going to be of interest to somebody. And so it's really
And
about,
if it's not, it's important to learn that, right?
even if you learn that people aren't interested in it, that doesn't mean that you should now shift gears and do whatever you think people want you to do.
No,
It
absolutely
just
not.
means integrate that feedback.
Yep.
And on the other hand, there is that entrepreneurship angle, which I think marketing covers the perspective of communicating to the public what you're interested in and what you're excited about and what you're working on. The
Yep.
entrepreneurship angle is figuring out how to monetize it.
Yep.
And so I feel like all of these things are converging going forward. Is
Yep.
that accurate? And does that relate at all to anything you've been talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% right. I mean, there are so many factors, and again, this is another area of similarity between my work and as an academic and my work as an entrepreneur. There are so many factors that have to conspire in order for a project to be successful, whether it's a research project or a company. The right idea, you have to start with the right idea, right? You have to figure out the right aspects of that idea to pursue in the right order. You have to get it in front of an audience that's going to care about it. You got to put the team together that's going to be able to realize it, and so on and so forth. So I think what you're saying is exactly true, right? We had at commencement, our commencement exercises this past fall, our speaker was a patent attorney at a large multinational that has a big presence here in North Carolina. And he gave some what I viewed as really accurate but tough truths to our graduates. I was very impressed with his speech. And one of the things that he said was, you are faced with the reality that pretty much from day one in your career after you graduate, there are going to be people that are above you in the organizations you're working in. And that's true even as a founder, right? You've got investors you need to answer to. You've got customers you need to answer to. And they're not going to be capable or willing to take the time to actually understand what it is you're doing as a technologist. And so to differentiate yourself, you not only have to do good technology work, but you also have to be a good marketer of yourself, of your skills, and of what you're doing. And that can mean, marketing in, a social media campaign. It can be marketing and advertising, but more importantly, it means marketing in communication within your organization, to be an advocate for your ideas, to be a strong voice, to help people that are in a position to make decisions about your ideas, but aren't necessarily equipped to do so. I thought that advice was incredibly valuable.
So as an engineer, are there any specific lessons that you've learned that you could communicate to people who are who are less naturally inclined to those aspects of it, to not only be good at it, but maybe to enjoy the process of doing it?
Yeah. So I, how to learn to enjoy it. That's a tough one for me to answer because it's something that I've always enjoyed. I grew up, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a very academic family. I've been on an academic career path for my life. So I love teaching. And I love imparting my passion for the knowledge and experience that I have to other people. And so I've always approached these tasks as exactly that. I view it as each interaction as an opportunity to excite somebody, to bring them on board, and to kind of instill in them the same kind of wonder and energy that I get from pursuing the ideas that I'm passionate about. And if you look at these interactions from that perspective, if you look at these efforts from the perspective of I want to help somebody feel what I feel, to me it doesn't feel like a task or a job. It's just fun,
Well, I have noticed that engineers seem to find their most extroverted self when they're trying to prove a point to somebody. So maybe you did tap into something. I think that a lot of engineers, they don't realize that the game of persuasion can actually be effective and fun. And
Yep.
so they tend to argue to prove a point, which, by the way, this is all directed at me. This is all my experience, my hard lessons. I'm not singling out engineers as if, I'm not guilty of the same exact crimes. I went to law school, but like the lawyer mindset and the engineering mindset are I think, quite similar. It's
Yep.
a very similar approach to problem solving. It's just a different kind of tool set or whatever. And this is the experience that I had, which was that I'm going to explain to you why you're wrong, and then I'm going to get mad and angry when you don't realize it.
Yep.
And when I started learning more about persuasion and about the simple techniques that you can use to actually get people to come around to your perspective, people want to hear new ideas. They want to be convinced of new things. You just have to learn how to make them like you. You have to appreciate that they're a person too, and they have their own ideas and their own lessons and perspectives. And you have to respect that when communicating with them. And if you can do that, you can actually engage in a dialogue where you not only teach them something, but you learn something.
The key word, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a dialogue. It's not a monologue. Persuasion is not a monologue. It's a dialogue, right? And I think if you keep that in mind going into these interactions, it makes them fun. It makes them interesting for both parties.
Absolutely. And as somebody who works with engineers who are at the top of their game,
Yep.
this is a vital skill for everyone, for entrepreneurs, for marketers, for engineers. If you want to perform at the highest levels, you have to be able to do this stuff. You can't jump into a team that is executing an order of magnitude better than anyone else in a specific field and expect to flourish without hitting all of these checkboxes.
Yep.
You can't just be a good engineer. And I don't think you should settle for just being a good engineer, just like a marketer and an entrepreneur shouldn't settle for having that as their whole identity. Which actually, how do you view yourself? Do you view yourself as an academic, as an engineer, as an entrepreneur?
All of the above, to be honest.
So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, to me. So I have long felt that my strength is my breadth, and there are people out there that are far better academics than I am. There are people out there that are far better entrepreneurs than I am. There are people out there that are far better engineers than I am. There are people out there that are far better computer scientists than I am. There are people out there that are far better animal behavior scientists than I am, far better social psychologists. My strength has always been the ability to connect these disciplines and to understand and gain appreciations for the tools, techniques, vocabularies, core problems, methodologies that these different specialists have. I think that's not necessarily the common thing. I think that in some ways has made my career path a little tougher. Doing work in an area as a computer scientist, having to earn tenure in a core computer science department, and doing work in an area where at the time I started doing it, there was no established publication venue. It was hard. It was really hard. And so that strength that I have is also a liability in some cases as well.
So is there anything else you want to communicate to anybody else out there? Any important message you want to send? If people want to learn more about what you're doing, or if people are interested in helping you maybe develop your next company or working with you in any way, what should they do?
So if you're interested in learning more about the work that I do as a professor, you can search for me at NC State. I run the CIIGAR lab, CIIGAR, which stands for well, it stands for two things: computational intelligence and interactive games research for some of the work that I do with computer games, and then it stands for canine instruction with instrumented gadgets administering rewards. So one of those was a backronym, and one of those was an acronym. I'll let you decide which one was which. You should be able to find me online there. And if you're interested in any of my entrepreneurial efforts, feel free to search for me on LinkedIn and or stay tuned for more information.